All right. So, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for session 2 of Traders of Our Time. I'm Gonzalo, will be your host today. First, in case you missed session 1, let me briefly introduce Bogdan. Bogdan Stoichescu spent 3 years on the AXIA Futures trading floor in London, closely observing how 10 professional prop traders consistently earn 7 and 8-figure incomes, right? He captured those insights in his 500-page book. I will paste a link shortly on the chat. Traders of Our Time, co-author with AXIA co-founder Alex Haywood. Bogdan is also the founder of and editor of Asymmetrist, where he continues to work from AXIA London trading floor, writing about trading culture, the trade development, and real trader stories. I'm really excited for today's session. Bogdan will introduce us to 3 highly profitable traders, each with a unique approach to the market and one foundation that all 3 share. All right. Before we get started, a quick reminder about today's giveaway. We'll be raffling off a day trade lifetime license for those who are not yet Jigsaw customers, or in case you're already a Jigsaw customers, when you're like trading license. So the raffle will take place at the end of the Q&A. So you have to be there to claim your prize. All right. With that, I'll hand it to you, Bogdan, and enjoy the session.
Gonzalo, thank you very much. I'll just get straight into it. I also see a question from Steve here on AI. There's a huge amount to talk about. It's talked about in the book. Hopefully that'll come up in the later sessions. I'll touch on it briefly in midway through this session as well. So don't worry. But anyway, let's get cracking. So today specifically is all about looking at 3 case studies, 3 traders in particular, which I'm sure a lot of you will probably be familiar with the book, with AXIA, with whatever. Either way, we're going to talk about them at length and in different ways you may have not seen before to make it applicable and practical, and also to draw on the first things that we talked about in our more theoretical session, let's say, session 1. And those 3 traders are the Razor, the Warrior, and the Engineer. That you can see, obviously, a few portraits of them on the slide. So if you haven't, or you need a quick reminder of what we talked about in session 1, what I mean by more conceptual, we looked at things, understanding complexity or complicated environments, the importance of navigating markets, not solving markets, thinking meta, trader's research dilemma, trade sense, and so on and so forth. You can see that on the slide. I will just get through it quickly. That was session 1. So if you missed it and I refer to these things, you can watch more about it in those videos. And of course, it's all at length discussed in the book. Now, for those who don't know who I am and what we're all about, what the book is, if you've missed session 1, very quickly, to spare those who obviously do know myself. So as Gonzalo said, I have joined many years ago now the AXIA floor. I was very much someone who got into trading on both, shall we say, as a retail trader and trying to understand what the whole game is, and then with the idea to land myself on a prop trading desk, which very much became AXIA back in 2019. I then went on a journey with Alex Haywood, AXIA's co-founder, to do this book together. The book was meant to be something like, I don't know, 6-9 months. Then it basically turned into 3 years and 7 months from doing the first, discussing it, and then doing the interview to actually publishing and launching back in March of this year. And now I run something called the Asymmetrist full-time. And what that means basically, both in terms of the book and Asymmetrist, and back when I was trading before on the floor, is that everything you're reading about in both places, it's drawn direct from source. So even now, as I'm talking to you, Asymmetrist is a continuation of the book. I'm basically something like writers in residence, we always say, on the floor. So I'm now on the floor as a writer, as opposed to a trader, and it's just mainly, capturing the stories, capturing the lessons, so many other things to capture and talk about. So I'm one of the co-writers, co-authors of the book, and of course the other co-writer and co-author of the book is Alex Haywood, who is one of the co-founders of AXIA. And he himself was a trader in the early noughties, has grown and led multiple teams of traders. What he's learned from leading these teams, and that all got reimagined and remade into AXIA. AXIA itself is basically it's a global operation now. There's a huge office in London, Cyprus, a few other satellite offices dotted around, all filled with outright futures traders. There's a few other people doing different things, but the main bread and butter is outright futures trading. Everything from 6, 7, 8-figure traders. Someone asked in the previous session, what does that even mean? That essentially means traders who clock that number, 7 figures, 8 figures, cumulatively in their accounts individually on a yearly basis. There's a few traders who've hit 7-figure trade on the day, or a multi-7-figure trade in a month, and so on. But essentially, we're talking about these kinds of levels. Very quickly, short and sweet. Picture of me on the floor, picture of Alex. You can visualize the London floor there a bit. And down below, when we matched inadvertently some fashion when we were interviewing some traders. Anyway, onwards. So let's begin today's session. What I really wanted to re-emphasize, someone asked in the previous session, do any of these traders not use order flow? Do any of these traders not use the price ladders or anything like that? I can say definitively that absolutely no one does not. Everyone engages with the price ladder and order flow, essentially. It is the first and last thing. It is the most essential thing. Gun to my head, you're going to steal everything from me. If I can keep one thing, it's going to be the price ladder. It's going to be the order flow. Every single trader, no matter how they trade, how they combine, and how they execute their edge, will tell you anything different. And like I said in the first session, the further away you move your trading, the way we see it, the further away you move from the price ladder, understanding the order flow, navigating the order flow, and therefore the markets, the more your trading decays. The more layers of abstraction, the more indicators, rules, the more you are not immersed with watching the price ladder every single day, the more your trading decays. So there's a lot to say about that just in this statement, but hopefully you can see it in today's session. Now, this might be some people familiar to you. This comes up in the Heroes chapter. It's one of the chapters that comes on later in the book. But I'll frame everyone to understand what this means. So very crudely, you can say that there's tactical traders and there's very strategic traders, and there's a whole spectrum in between tactical and strategic traders. We can define a tactical trader as someone who exploits opportunities provided by the market. What is the biggest opportunities provided by the markets right now? It's headlines, it's thematic stuff, it's Iran, Israel, US, unfortunately, in the past roughly 2 weeks. Trump tariffs, it's headline thematic stuff, all on Trump since basically the beginning of the year. These are very much opportunities, very much in your face, very violent, very explicit, okay? And so tactical traders are best at just exploiting these kind of opportunities that are just, shall we say, provided by the market, okay? Strategic traders, on the other hand, are people who create their own tactical opportunities, meaning that they layer different pieces of information together and come up with a view on the markets, a kind of a view or placing information in such a way that they can see a trade which is so obvious to them, that is so not obvious to everyone else, that gives them a tactical opportunity to execute that kind of trades. The problem is that getting to that level of strategic depth in your trading requires you to have, as I've written there, more adjacent skills needed, meaning that you just need so many separate buckets of understanding, all not separated like a bucket, but like all molded into some very intangible, difficult thing. All right. A very wide repertoire of understanding from a charting perspective, profile, flow, price ladder, macroeconomics, trade sense, just having like a lot of these different tactics to layer and tie everything together, okay? Which means that the more adjacent skills you need, the longer it takes to develop into a very strategic trader, okay? It's kind of like the ultimate evolution of a trader. However, a tactical trader actually could get going and start building an account very fast because it's just, the opportunity is there, you can grab it. The issue is that obviously if the market gives you that opportunity, it can also take it away. Things can change. You just don't know when things will change. It will seem unbelievable to people today, or I mean, this was even before my time, since I started getting involved in the markets in 2016. But like, think about this. If you're knee deep in the middle of the 2007, 2008, 2009 crisis, financial crisis, great financial crisis, and then the European debt crisis, 2012, 2013, that entire years, right, of high volatility, of uncertainty, it might seem to you that this high volatility regime will never finish, will never end. And then all of a sudden you had the driest, longest extended period of low volatility, heat death in the markets from 2013 onwards up until 2019, up until 2020, right? Years and years of low volatility, single digit VIX sometimes. And if volatility is the lifeblood as us as traders, meaning low volatility just absolutely decimates traders, it very much was the case for us, right? So um, it's kind of like a double-edged sword being hyper tactical, but as you can see that the most masterful tactical traders still pull out P&L every single year, most months, and we'll talk about that in today's session. More importantly, lastly, as you probably read, there's no such thing as jumping from just saying, okay, you know what, I want to skip the grindy, looking at the price ladder, being there all day, learning the micro, the minutia of the game. I'm just going to jump to become the ultimate strategic trader. That doesn't work because you need to learn step by step how everything is linked. You need to understand how the minutia of how the market trades, how the market auctions up and down on the price ladder, how then that dovetails into bigger plays in the big picture, how all of a sudden something can go from a market that's not being dominated in a thematic sense, how it can be dominated in a more market sentiment sense, how the market can correlate and work with each other, and all these other things. Like if I will talk about it again, that's a whole other session. So everyone starts as a very tactical, minutia driven trader and then expands outwards, often by necessity. And we'll look at that in a minute. All that is to say, don't be scared thinking, I don't want to be this price ladder driven trader all my life. You never know how you're going to develop. That's the entire point. We touched upon this in session 1. It comes up in Traders of Our Time. If you can predict yourself as a trader, you're probably not being that innovative. Everyone who started out as a trader never knew in the trader they're going to develop. They just went with whatever worked at the time and they just developed adjacently. Okay, so one last thing I want to mention here, very famous quote, I'm sure a lot of you know it, something the engineer mentioned for a long, long time, and we put it into the book. When the idea is obvious, its access is difficult. When the idea is subtle, its access is simple. So is the difference between a very tactical and a very strategic trader summarized, meaning that a very, very good tactical trader can get involved into obvious ideas, meaning like obvious to everyone, right? So if Trump tweets something, if something comes up on the headlines, whatever, it's going to send the markets crazy. If the markets are moving and everything's crazy, that's kind of obvious to everyone. It's like, you're not going to be sleeping, right? But getting involved in that and monetizing that is very, 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 very difficult. Your tactical ability to execute that has to be very, very refined. Okay. However, if you can piece so many different pieces of the puzzle together to give an idea that is obvious to you but subtle to others, getting involved in that often is no more difficult than just putting on the trade, just selling a level, for example, and then the market just goes and then adding in or something like that. Yeah. So that's another way to re-express it. Now, what might be very interesting here is such graph. However, if you will have read the book and you've read much of if you've seen session 1 or read something in the Asymmetrist, you will know how allergic I am to thinking a bit too reductively, thinking too much in terms of a graphic, thinking in terms of a model. Okay, so this is a very, very rough and ready model. Don't take this model to like the nth degree and think this is everything. But it's very interesting to place all these 10 traders that you've seen in the book, or you might read about in the book, or that are literally, when I say in the book, that's because they're literally upstairs on the upstairs on the floor, or in other offices like in the Cyprus floor. To divide them as such: tacticians on the left, strategic traders on the right, and if you want to divide them again between traders who engage in a higher level of I don't want to say the phrase high frequency trading, because that phrase has been very, very abused. That will mean a million different things to everyone, and I need to quantify what that means. So let me quantify it, or qualify it, I should say. Higher trade frequency and lower trade frequency, just on the way they're involved and the way they approach and tackle different opportunities in the market. Okay, that doesn't mean if I say higher trade frequency, they're not just clicking or they're engaged in so-called high frequency trading. Just forget about high frequency trading. It just means the way they're engaged in the market is just relatively higher than another. So take two extremes. The warrior is always in the market. The guy is just he said like his greatest weakness or his greatest pain is not being involved when there's things going on. He always has, even now, even me knowing him for so many years, it shocks me how he's just always in something. He just always has to have something on. Okay, take the opposite trader, the raiser, who's barely in a trade ever. He has zero exposure. Like he's just never in a trade. Okay, those are your two extremes. Again, relative to each other. And there you have everyone sort of in the middle, the student, the collective, the voyager, and so on. I will keep adding to this, to the point of this graph. The traders we'll look at explicitly today are the warrior, the raiser, and the engineer. And what do you notice? They are the extremes of each quadrant, okay? When you examine the extremes, it's often much easier to understand what makes them special and then work backwards from there, because you're starting from very clear, like obvious big extremes. And often people in the middle there that you see on that graph are kind of mixtures of both. And then if I would then continue explaining their mixtures, again, I'll have to be, there's so much context, so much nuance. I'll be like, okay, wait, but this, but consider that, but consider this. And I'll end up rambling for like 3 hours. So talking about the extremes often simplifies things, the engineer, the warrior, the raiser. But there is more. Let's look at these traders in their early career. Everyone here started as a tactical lower trade. They didn't trade as frequently as they do now, shall we say, which tells you quite a few things. Because by definition, as a new trader, you will not be able to necessarily qualify and tier different opportunities. Opportunities are not created equal in the market. Of course they're not. You can't hit the same pattern or same trade, however you want to call it, with the same size, same approach, same conviction every single time. It cannot be so. And obviously your ability to spot these things, if you look at it on a 15-year career, they're going to be the lowest ever when you're new, because you just don't know what you don't know, right? So by its nature, you should be or are trading less frequently than probably you will be in the future, and you'll be a very tactical thing. You know, the market probably has to create volatility, create opportunities for you to be able to engage within them. Okay, and more importantly, so far we haven't seen anyone come in with a very broad-minded strategic sense and then somehow evolve into a profitable trader. You know, everyone's moved from tactician to strategist. There's no like two-way street, there's a one-way street. Adding to this again. Sticking with the early career, forgetting now about a higher frequency of trading and lower frequency of trading, let's replace it with structured and unstructured trading. Again, this comes up a lot in the book, but to summarize it, a structured kind of trading is a trader normally who will go for all in, all out. And an unstructured trader is the kind of trader who will go, who will scale in, scale out, roughly speaking, crudely speaking. Often, unstructured traders are more dynamic, meaning they will probably put in a few clips in the market. They will see, they'll try and adapt to the market flow and just kind of, they'll just get stuck in and then figure it out. Okay, they'll be ballooning their, like an accordion, you know, they'll be ballooning their positions, figuring out as the market flow comes in and out, and just try and stay into the trade and try and just be there as the big, you know, the big flow comes in, or the thing, or until the thing they want to see happen happens. Okay, whereas a very structured trader would naturally be much more patient, hold, and then just put on the full size, bang, and then they're done. Okay, so again, very crudely, but that's kind of how you want to think about these kinds of traders. And naturally, funnily enough, because you're quite new, early in your career, you'd actually be quite unstructured because you don't know what structure you're waiting for. You don't know what you're kind of waiting for. So you'll be quite very much involved at the beginning, which is not a bad thing because that's how you should be at the beginning. Okay. However, let's look at how they evolved and how they are now, sticking to structured and unstructured. Once again, what do you notice? The engineer, the raiser, and the warrior are all at different extremes. The raiser is the definition of a tactical, structured trader who has, you know, you need to know everything about anything that you're doing. You need to know everything about your trade at all times. That is the raiser. The warrior is completely unstructured. He'll just get involved. He'll always have a trade on. He'll always adapt dynamically to whatever's happening at any one time. And he is kind of like, you know, he's very much a news tactical trader. We'll get into that in a minute. And he's kind of like the definition of the tactical unstructured trader. So now you can see how edge can be explored in different ways, all in tandem or all related to the order flow and the price ladder. Lastly, the engineer is more of your strategic structured trader, and you can see how everyone else in the book, everyone else on the floor are related to them in some way. Again, this is a very crude graph. In reality, which we'll talk about in a minute, everyone has tactical and strategic sort of views on things, of course. I put the student there in yellow because you encountered the student in the book as he was in 2022. Since we've captured him in 2022, the student's grown amazingly. It'll be really good to actually do a follow-up piece with the student on the asymmetries, perhaps, like catching up with the student, because he's actually moved into much more of an unstructured process. He's gone more strategic, but more unstructured as he's taken things more intuitively and digested, and has this sort of like intuition he's built just through a lot of repetition and just being involved in the markets, compared to how he was years ago, where he had to be very, very structured and explicit in the kind of strategic technical place he had. Someone mentioned to me in the Q&A in the session 1 that something in Asymmetrist I wrote at the beginning of June, which is that a trader's development from 5 to 6 is linear and emulated. The move from being a 6 to 7-figure trader depends on the market environment and the will to perform. That means many things. I won't talk about it now. But the move from 7 to 8 figures, meaning you're making that in a specific year, is to dominate a niche. And those 3 traders, the warrior, the student, the engineer, and the razor, are the definition of traders who dominate a niche. They are at the extremes of that spectrum. And those are, again, the people we're going to look at right now, the warrior. So if you want to quickly just use some words to define the warrior, he is your news and flow trader. So he is someone who, using market flow, the price ladders, will be trading news all the time. That is his forte. But as I said, he always has some kind of position on somewhere, somehow. He's always in the market. He's always feeling the market constantly. He's like a perfect definition of that. When I say news, what does that mean? Because even within news, trading the news, there's a lot of different things. Like, for example, you'll have people who might be news traders, but they'll never touch economic data. There'll be people who will only trade economic data and not like random headlines because someone somewhere tweeted something. Okay. In the warrior's case, he's basically a junkie for everything. If there is some kind of injection of volatility that happens because of economic data, central banks, tweet from Trump, geopolitical headlines, he'll be trading it all the time. Okay. What we talk about in the book is the fact you shouldn't even be thinking of him really as a news trader. He's just someone who's just always constantly just trading volatility. It's just he trades at his best when that volatility coincides with the news. Okay. Because then it gives him context of, when do I get big? When do I get extra big? When is this like, really, really big, and just unleash the dogs, put on maximum size, this kind of thing. Okay. So he's the sort of the ultimate dynamic trader. But he is at his best when the market is there's no definitive like bang headline, we go. It's kind of like something's come out and then the squawks talk about it. And then Twitter starts talking about it. And all of a sudden everyone starts talking about it. And there's this kind of like slow burn, like digesting by the markets. Okay. I think I'm sure everyone here will be familiar with the fact that markets don't price in things like a light switch. Okay, a lot of academia, a lot of mainstream finance sort of always talk about the rationality of the markets, how markets always price in anything. There's no edge to be had via markets, but they're missing the painfully obvious point to anyone that's been a practitioner of the markets, that often the markets don't price in things like a light switch. They like an on-off button. Sometimes they do that very, very dramatically, but even then, it takes a while. The market's constantly digesting things like an organism. It's constantly thinking, okay, price in the bonds. Okay, the bonds are priced in too much. They come back. Equities, so on and so forth. There's this like slow burn. Okay, and that's the real forte of the warrior. Something I called here bite and hold, as opposed to smash and grab. So there are news traders who will be smash and grab only. They will literally, like what people might imagine, to scalp the news. Okay, so headline, boom, just get in, don't wait for anything, and then the second, you just get out after a certain amount of ticks, or the second the market starts to come back, you're out. There's no questioning, there's no tiering, thinking, okay, this is actually big. No, it comes back, boom, you're out. Okay, so that's kind of like a very isolated niche skill set where the entire Every single day, you're just there. You wait for something, headline, boom, smash and grab, that's it. Okay. The warrior is not that. He is very much someone who will be involved in these very slow, churny, and then just always constantly be involved and just adjust. He dynamically adjusts his position based on what's happening. So he's tactical, he's unstructured, and that's what I mean by trade sense. If you want to talk about it in this way, because again, some people ask me about trade sense, something we talk about at length in the book. The warrior has unbelievable heaps, unbelievable amount of trade sense. In fact, for you to remain as a master tactician in today's markets, you have to have insane trade sense, like talent levels of trade sense, okay? Meaning that trade sense in two things. One, to understand the significance, the sensitivity of the opportunity that you're in, okay? To understand, okay, this is something of an opportunity, but I'm not going to go crazy, unleash the size, okay? This is kind of like understanding the sensitivity of opportunity. Two, adjusting to the trade and adjusting to the flow within while you're in it, understanding how the probabilities to what you've just done have adjusted, and then just having always this like Rubik's Cube in your brain, just constantly thinking about, okay, are we are likely higher to extend? Okay, something else has happened. Okay, the market's not reacting to how I expected, and just being very, very supple and just constantly just reassessing. Okay, that's kind of like trade sense in a nutshell. However, as I mentioned, just because I put the warrior on the spectrum of being like a very tactical trader doesn't mean he has no strategic awareness of, he doesn't have a higher view of the macroeconomic conditions, the correlations, the sense of opportunity. There is that as well. He is very, very, very strong in all departments. And I mentioned here correlations because that's something that's very potent with the warrior. You can see that very visually. The way he navigates multiple markets, the way he navigates the flow is by understanding correlations very deeply. Okay, markets are always correlated when they're in a very thematic kind of sense. I'll come back to this. This is exactly what I mean by the iron filings metaphor at the bottom of the slide. So I'll come back to it. Let me pin that for a second. But let me just reinforce. He is at his best when there's a thematic flow in the markets. As Alex Haywood said, Alex Haywood, the co-founder of AXIA, on the floor, co-author of the book, he was joking about how sometimes, because the warrior always has to be in the markets, it's like if there's a thematic thing dominating the markets, he will always be like, he'll literally be the best trader because he always has to be in. If there's nothing really going on, he might actually end up being the, quote unquote the worst trader. Okay, on a relative basis, like he'll be down very, very little, even on like those kind of like bad trading. But you might be sitting there thinking, man, what's he getting so involved in? There's like literally nothing's going on, and you're probably right. But that's the double edge. You can't have it both ways, right? Like that's just how he navigates and operates in markets. It's often the case in trading. You can't have it both ways in so many things. If you want to have huge up days, you have to have the stomach for big down days, right? It's just how it is. What I mean here by iron filings or sunflower, you might be thinking, what the hell is this? When the markets, and I'm sure a lot of you notice this, when the markets gravitate, it's like when there's a central theme going on. We've just seen this with Trump tariffs, kind of Iran, Israel, US. It's kind of like a magnet. The market can only be concerned about it, and as the market picks up all the iron filings, yeah, the across markets, every kind of market you look at, the order flow moves up and down related to each other, like you're passing a magnet over iron filings, and they all just start standing up. They're all kind of like forming a pattern. They're all subservient now to the magnet that's being passed around. Yeah, and as you move around the magnet, you can move around the iron filings as a metaphor. If that doesn't make any sense, think of it as like how sunflowers track the sun, and they're all moving like a pattern. They're all moving together to track the sun. That's what it's like when there's like a big theme or like the big news happening in the markets. Okay, and when we're in that kind of mode, that's when the warrior will just perform like to an unbelievable degree. There is a very interesting video on the AXIA YouTube site of the warrior tackling. People who've read the book, this is actually talked about in the book as well. Funnily enough, should we say Iran Trump 1.0 back in 2020, in January 2020, when there was a airstrike on the General Soleimani, and that caused huge risk off in the markets. And I only put this slide here just for you to emphasize this is what the warrior is looking at all day, every day. If you don't believe that somehow there's a trader who doesn't look at order flow or price ladder, it's like this is it. Like this is why there's so many screens everywhere, because you need, like, you're looking at so many markets all the time. If you're a news driven trader, there's so many markets to look at. You need so many screens for price ladder. That's why there's so many screens, put it simply. Okay. But out of all the things I talked about, there is still one very, very important power of the warrior, which is that he's very comfortable, very good at operating on a sample set of one, sample set of zero, a low number of sample sets. This is where AI is coming up. To Steve, who asked me about AI, and a few other people in the previous session. Again, we'll talk about it a bit more in the later sessions. Quick reminder, this is why I brought this old slide from session one. The markets are not complicated in the way of chess, in the way of Go, in the way of StarCraft, with some caveats, meaning that these environments are computable. You can create the best practice playbook. They are solvable. You can iterate yourself to always understanding what is the best concurrent action. Okay, this is what everyone assumes markets to be. However, markets are complex. They are an emergence of behavior. Complex environments exhibit the behaviors of self-organization, of spontaneous things breaking out into patterns, chaotic behavior, fat-tailed behavior, meaning extreme situations happen a lot faster than you would expect if you model that environment in a normal distribution, and agents and units in that environment adapt to each other. Okay, so markets are closer to a rainforest and not a complicated car, for example. Yeah, so this is why I keep talking about linking the sessions. Everything comes back to markets are meant to be navigated, not solved. A complicated environment can be solved. A complex environment like the markets is only to be navigated. That's why we can say the warrior is the ultimate navigator, in the sense that he doesn't have to see, he doesn't need a huge data set to see something happen 100 times before and then have conviction to go big. He only has to see it maybe once or maybe never. Because why? He is engaging in what is still uniquely human, not the area or the world of the machines, the algos, the AI, whatever you want to call it, large language models, statistics-based models, LLMs, that I think a lot of people are being worried about, or of it sort of eating their edge. This bogeyman of the algos and the machine beating the human trader has been, an anxiety that has existed in the markets for like 20 years. This is kind of like, this is just a rebranding of the fear, essentially. But why? And again, we talk about this at length. There's a whole chapter devoted to this. So there's a lot to talk about here, but let me jump over it. It's the fact that your human ability right now is to do something we called in the book world building. In a sense, you can, in your head right now, you can conjure future states of the world. You can speculate into the future. I use that word intentionally in the best possible sense. Think of all the possible shadow futures that there could be in the market. And in those shadow futures, you can think, okay, the markets are going to act like this. They're going to correlate like this. They're probably going to be acting like this. The warrior has just such an ability where he can do that, not only so lucidly and so well, but he can then have utter down in his bones belief that when that world is about to become true, he's going to do huge size on it. Okay, he's not going to tier his conviction based off 99 samples that have happened before, i.e., an inductive rules-based sample set approach. I can see the future. I can use my common sense. I can use my best guess common sense, which is very much something that's called abductive reasoning. And abductive reasoning is still very much a human-only endeavor. It hasn't been broken into by AI and machines, and we talk about in the book, because the very infrastructure that current so-called AI is built on, i.e. computer architecture, prevents them from doing that. Okay, which is a long, huge other kettle of fish. I will skip that for now. But essentially, the huge edge of the warrior is just to go on, have huge conviction on imagining it or seeing it once, which is not unlike how various startups are done. Like some entrepreneurs come in and be like, I have insane conviction that this is going to become a huge business in 10, 15 years time. Everyone tells me it's not going to happen. I can see it. I don't care what everyone else says. I'm going to go big on it. Boom. And they do it. Okay. So that's the warrior to a T. Just checking the time. Okay, cool. So coming back to this graph once more. We're now going to talk about the engineer at the top right of the graph, moving in the complete opposite direction from a tactical unstructured trader to a strategic structured trader, that is the engineer. So here is a huge difficulty in discussing the engineer, because the engineer, when a lot of people look at him or they talk about him, they talk about, oh, he's a technical trader. He's a chart trader, he's a technical trader, which one cannot be further from the truth. Secondly, it is very difficult to discuss him without using the terms. And as I wrote, we are in dire need of coming up with new terms and words to discuss traders like the engineer, meaning they engage in a very explicit framework for operating in the markets. That happens, in his own words, and another trader, the hero's words, that has learned under the engineer. That just happens to be the market profile. That just happens to be a language they speak, and they use the profile as a way to parse information, whether it's information they glean from the yield curve, whether it's some kind of order flow activity on the price ladder there, whether it's some kind of thing the FOMC said yesterday. They parse all of it through their framework, explicitly built within the market profile, because that makes them think in a certain way. And I'll come back to this moment, thinking and language, and it's something very important. So that's sort of his niche, number one. Number two, as explained, is sort of very explicit framework. Again, the book talks about it at length. To really get into the meat of it without kind of leaving you guys hanging, we'll need like a lot more time. So again, just having a very purposeful framework. Strategic, semi-structured. He is someone who, again, he will try and really focus on the rare opportunities that very few people can see through layering so much information through the profile, through macroeconomics, through whatever, and then try and trade that as best he can. Point of observation. Back when he was, he is now trading remote for a few years, but back when he was on the first floor in London, what would you have seen? Or you can actually still see now, to be honest. When all the news traders are trading, he might be doing something. When all the news traders are standing up and thinking, oh, it's a quiet day, the engineer is probably going to be long 1,000 bunds. And everyone's going to think, by the end of the day, everyone's going to see bund grinding up like the entire day and thinking, what's going on? Why is the bund like just went 100 ticks on nothing? You know? So that's because he's isolated that opportunity that no one else saw coming. Again, the subtle idea accessed simply. But again, as I mentioned, just because I put him in a strategic sense doesn't mean he doesn't have the tactical ability to just be very dogged and get into a position and have the order flow skills to navigate that kind of position. It doesn't mean he doesn't understand news. It doesn't mean he doesn't understand correlations. Of course he does. Of course, these are all skill sets every trader today needs to have. Okay. And of course he has a sense of opportunity. Most importantly, profile as language, market auction theory. So the reason why profile works well, and the reason why you can have an edge in terms of having explicit language, is that if essentially, let me reverse. If you come in onto a floor, or you examine new traders wherever they are, online, or you just bring in a whole group, a new batch of traders onto a floor, nowhere will you see very sloppy language used to define all sorts of things. On the flip side, never will you see very explicit, specific, pinpoint accurate language used than, for example, the engineer and the hero talking to each other. They are very, very specific, explicit in the language they use when they're discussing the technical landscape, the profile. You know, they'll never say, oh, the market's bullish. Or, oh yeah, the market's gonna kind of bid. Oh yeah, okay, there's flow. No, they'll be talking about things related to the auction. You know, the market is auctioning higher. As it auctioned higher, put in a selling tail, and then we auctioned lower on that news headline. They have very specific things. They always tie it back to the market auction, back to the price ladder, and everything's sort of joined at the hip. And that gives them a huge edge because of always making sure that they're thinking very explicitly along certain guidelines. As we discuss in the book, the weakness of technical trading, the huge glaring weakness, is that compared to news trading, compared to tactical trading, the market kind of gives you the approach. There's news, there's flow, you get involved. It's kind of giving you a framework, so to speak. With very strategic technical trading, using that word, it's very easy to be sloppy because there's no way how you can frame anything, which is why a lot of people get involved, and there's so much nonsense fluff out there to kind of make it seem like technical trading works, quote unquote, because and of course it does. This the engineer is, if you want to call him a technical trader, but like it's hard to argue and it's against someone because you can skin the cat a trillion different ways with so quote unquote technical trading because there's no explicit framework and way to just approach markets. And so technical traders or people who want to evolve into being a technical trader need to have this kind of framework. Okay. And so that is perhaps the quickest way I can summarize the engineer again, just thinking about the time. So one last thing, what you'll always see in front of the engineer screens are profiles. Okay. If you don't know what market profiles, here's a quick image of them. One last thing I want to say about the profile, which comes up in Traders of Our Time. The market profile is not like another way to pick out levels. The market profile is not another way to say, okay, oh, you told me the profile had this kind of shape, so I went long. Okay, it doesn't mean just because you see it on the profile you'll just get long and this is the kind of sloppy thinking and trading I'm talking about. It's like as we said, let me just read it here. Just as the liquid takes the shape of a container, so does it shape a trader's execution. So does the market profile shape a trader's execution. The profile helps in identifying the container more than just that, but it helps to identify the container. Once it's shaping your execution, then it's all up to you to navigate the flow, the price ladder, everything. So a tactical trader might have his news and that gives him the container and then you figure it out. A trader like the engineer will use the profile to give him the equivalent. Okay. Okay, so hopefully we're doing kind of okay for time. Now, I mentioned something important. Moving from a tactical to a strategic trader means you need to have adjacent skills. And this is how said traders evolve. The hero and the engineer evolved where they started on price ladder first. They understood the minutiae of the auction on the price ladder first. They knew that intuitively. And then they transplanted that understanding onto the market profile. And their leap from one to the other was very quick because the observations and all the skills are basically the same. Like the hero said, the market profile is like order flow on the longer time frame. So it was very intuitive to move from one thing to the other. What is not intuitive is if you give a new trader the market profile, they've never looked at they never looked at a price ladder. They don't look at flow. They don't really understand the auction and how the market can auction up and down and so on. And then it becomes very complicated very quickly. So it's again, or let's say you want to make that trader strategic from the beginning and he doesn't have the raw immersive skills of understanding the flow. Okay. And this is what I mean, like everything the engineer is, you probably read all these words already, so I'll just skip through them. It's all about, if you look at the engineer on any given day, any of these traders on any given day, but let's just stick to the engineer. It's a product of flow, immersion on the day, flow, seeing how the profile develops, looking at how the profile builds while looking at the order flow. How does it build that ledge? How does it build? How does the does that tail happen? How does that selling tail happen? Being immersed again, and all of a sudden the day emerges into something more interesting. Perhaps a trade can emerge. Everything is, and it's like you're building all the pieces together into a masked puzzle piece, and all of a sudden a trade can emerge from there, and that is how conviction emerges. That is how timing emerges. That is how you think about your sizing, okay, of the trade. It's all about how it happens in the moment in time. It's why it can't really be predicted when all these things can happen. We look at a trade in the book. We asked what was the difference between the engineer taking a 100K day in the S&P versus a $900,000 trade. Okay, he had no clue a huge near $1 million trade was coming up. Of course not. But there are certain things that happened at that exact moment in time, often just by happenstance. It happened to be an OPEX day. It happened to be a random bid that came into the S&P. And that all of a sudden, so many things emerged in that moment that gave him conviction to add to his trade, conviction to stick with it, and then he sold the trade through. Replace that with, you might be in a trade, all of a sudden, there's some other peripheral thing happening. Maybe there's another headline. Now you're on side. Oh, wait, this is different. I'm not just going to like dogmatically follow my rules. Wait, this is actually a very rare happenstance where I'm hugely on side to my trade. Great. Now I can take on another trade because this news thing came out and all of a sudden you have a huge, huge day. And it's just being very adaptive. Okay. It's always an emergence of the day constructing itself, which can only be the way you can operate in a market environment, which is navigating complexity. Lastly, there's this very great quote we put into the book from Bobby Fischer: "Tactics flow from a superior position." If you can identify strategically a really opportune, subtle idea, subtle to everyone else, but obvious to you, then everything else comes from there. Okay. Let me just move on quickly for a bit of time. That is my answer. Someone asked me this exact question. I just copied and pasted it. What is your signal confirmation process before executing a high conviction trade? That is quite literally, I hope I can answer it by exactly this. You can't create structure or a system for enabling conviction much of the time. Okay. It just happens in real time, essentially. And that is unique to every trader. It cannot be given by someone else. That is the only person who could answer that question is obviously yourself, but it's essentially it'll always be something that happens in the moment and just developing the trade sense and the immersion and the skills to get to that point. Lastly, for people who are not convinced that the engineer is somehow not a price ladder trader, this is his a recording of one of his screens. I think in and around 2020, 2021. Profile, price ladder, joined at the hip. Okay. Now, very quickly, we're at the old graph. Now we're going to look at the top left, a very structured, very, very tactical, very niche, very, very niche trader, the Razor. So the Razor, again, very, very hard to define him. There's no real word, crude word to put him into a box. He is someone who'll always just look for the best possible, safest tick in the market. Now, you might be thinking, oh, he's a scalper. And that's completely wrong. I know I'm being a bit flippant. The only problem is just the word scalper has just been so abused over the past 20 years to mean everything and nothing. It also puts you in a frame of mind that is perhaps wrong to understand this trader and probably understand your own trading. So I don't want to use that word. It will put things into your head which are not relevant. Okay, so I will just, in case you're thinking this, but let's just describe the Razor. He is someone who will always take advantages as a very weird, rare, abnormal flow, order flow, or just kind of market behavior. Okay, I can't be more specific than this, unfortunately, because he is one of the traders who, indeed, one of the rare traders where he doesn't want to share precisely what he does, even though we talk about in the book one of his like big all-time trades, which he's been working on for like 10, 12 years. But also he's one of the people that would be affected if, we start going around talking about what he trades. But that doesn't matter. The entire point about what we talk about in the book and everything else is if you're copying these guys, you're not learning from them. It's not about giving you your daily fish. It's about learning how to fish. Okay. That is the only way you can build a career. But just so you guys know, like there's level of specificity I can't go into, but that's not the point. Enough where I'm talking. There's enough here that you can go on and conceptualize things in this way. So he is a master of identifying abnormal flow, market behavior, and then applying crazy, crazy huge size in areas where no one looks, with uncanny, crazy market timing and selection. That's what makes him very tactical. That's what makes him very structured. But his trade sense is different because he is someone who's going to be in and out of the markets instantly. He's never in a trade for split second longer, and I mean quite literally split second longer than you need to be. So it's not like he'll get in and figure it out. His trade sense is understanding the sensitivity of the time and understanding the environment that it best suits his trades. And his trade sense in that sense is masterful. It's like it can't be beaten by anyone else. And that's how you get an 8-figure trader, because he dominates that niche. That's how you get an 8-figure trader, the engineer, who dominates his niche, because no one else can do it better. And same for the warrior. Okay. And that's what I mean by alert level. He knows when to stand down or to be hyper focused. That's another advantage of the Razor. His ability to focus and be patient is unmatched. And I also say all these things because when I said about trade frequency, he also has one of the lowest trade frequencies relative to everyone else. And that's why what I mean, because when people think scalping, they just think, oh yeah, you're just clicking all the time, you're getting involved. Uh, so that's why it's the wrong way to apply this label to the razor, because he is involved very rarely. He takes one tick and he does it with huge size. So when have you thought about trading in that way? Exactly. There is one trade we can talk about which exemplifies the razor perfectly, which again, at length in the book, there's a lot of drama that happened about the limit down trade. What we mean by limit down is this, if that the S&P goes down a certain level, CME shuts it. Depending on various other factors, it can't go below a certain price, and then all sorts of weird, crazy, funky stuff starts happening because of a rule that has now determined the behavior of the market. It's like a shall we say an artificial rule that the limit down, like it literally physically can't trade below a certain price because the CME prevents it from doing so. The rules to how the limit down works now is different to how it was back in 2020 when the razor took this trade, the limit down trade. But essentially, March 2020, the Fed does emergency rate cut. Everyone freaks out and wakes up. The next session, then we have a repeated series of limit down in the S&P. The first time the razor attempts it, he attempts it with 1,000 S&P short. It wasn't meant to be for a reason you'll see in the book if you guys read it, hopefully. And however, the second part, he took that trade with 600 lots S&P short. And what happened was he was basically locked in short. But the way it happened was that he was locked in short for like basically 14 hours before the CME reopened for the next day. And then he took out that trade. But basically, the reason I'm talking about this is because it's an example where there's this kind of artificial opportunity created by kind of like a rule, that theoretically shouldn't be there. Maybe it should be there, but that's another political, bureaucratic kind of question that we're not really interested in here. Okay, so that's kind of like the razor to a T. Again, you can see why all these guys dominate their niche because it's just so unique. Like you just can't imagine anyone else dominating that. Okay, moving on and concluding somewhat. So what can you assess with all these people? When you meet them, you cannot help but think these guys are doing their life's work. I mentioned the unique again and again. I will keep saying that. Meaning, in this case, when I say can't swap, it would be an absolute disaster if you make the warrior trade like the razor and you make the razor trade like the warrior, or if you put like the warrior trade like the engineer, or vice versa. Okay, they're so matched in their personality, in their very fiber of their being, in terms of how it feels like they were put on this earth to trade the way they were trading. There's no other way to say about it. I'm not being dramatic about it. Literally, when you meet them, it feels like they're put on this earth to do this exact thing, and you just can't imagine them being anywhere any way else. Okay, they are all, hopefully I've now made it clear why they're always navigating markets, they're not solving the markets. And something we borrowed and we put in the Razors chapter from this book 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel and Blake Masters. They talk about how the next Bill Gates won't be Bill Gates. If you're trying to be the next Bill Gates by copying Bill Gates, you're doing it wrong, because Bill Gates, Microsoft is a unique thing, and they became so big because they're unique in that moment in time. You can learn, but you can be the next warrior by learning from him, by being your own unique trader, by developing your own niche and moving in that way. Okay, so the next warrior won't be the next warrior, the next razor won't be the next razor, and so on and so forth. Okay, which is what I mean by point 4. They all pioneered in their time and in their environment. When the engineer was coming up, he was nearly cut from that trading floor he was growing up in, another trading floor, not AXIA's, in his very early days. It's mentioned in the book. I've skipped out completely their life stories, by the way. Their life stories, their careers, and all the drama and all the things is in the book. I've just skipped that out entirely for sake of getting everything done in an hour. But they're all pioneering. They're all very, very pioneering. Everything the Razor was doing, so much of that, they had a lot of people saying, that's not real trading. What's this? This is weird. Okay, he's now an 8-figure trader, the most consistent 8-figure trader. I forgot to mention, by the way, his consistency is ludicrous, like unbelievably ludicrous, like to the point where if you tell anyone like this is, you just think like, oh yeah, this is just make believe, whatever. Like unbelievable iron consistency. He trades upside for insane consistency. Okay. he had his detractors. This is not real trading. When engineer was thinking about a profile trade, especially in the prop scene, it seems, Alex and I have talked about this or observed this, that when you go into the retail space, all the retail space is obsessed with the idea that you can't trade the news. But in the prop space, everyone is obsessed with the idea that technical trading doesn't work. Okay. So in the prop space, the engineer was just, there's some people who came before him who introduced the market profile, of course. But the way he articulates and puts it and trades it is just unique and crazy, and he had many detractors. They didn't understand what he was doing. Again, breaking new ground, being a pioneer. Same with the warrior in his own way. But again, I'll have to speed run a bit and close off. The idea is these guys are your models. They're your North Star, but you need to fork them and to become your own trader and learn from them, not copy them to infinity. Lastly, they're all on different extremes, but as with many things, the things on the extremes are often quite similar to each other. How they are similar is they can identify moments of when the market can only do so many things, unique things, and the market has to do that thing before it can do anything else, i.e., that leads to moments of unique extreme conviction. And because they can identify those moments of unique extreme conviction, they will modulate their size, i.e., put huge size, or reversely, cut to nothing instantly. Okay. Which again applies to all the traders in the book. But this is like the cleanest examples, and that's why we're looking at the extremes. Okay. So if you guys, I see some questions there. There's some people asking, what's this book name? It's called Traders of Our Time, Navigating the Market Impossible Landscape. It's also come out in March. If you guys want chapter 1, which is for free, I encourage you to none other go than to axiafutures.com/jigsaw. You will find this website. By signing up, you can get the first chapter for free. It talks about all the traders, introduces the traders. It's a vibe chapter of getting the vibe on a trading floor, shall we say, to use a more popular word these days. A vibe chapter that introduces the kind of trading that's going on, the way it's the book. It's kind of like a flashlight into the rest of the book. You get the pace of the book, the idea of the book, everything. If you leave with something, I hope you can leave with that chapter at least, so you can kind of see, and introduces all the other traders as well. It talks about a very unique, interesting situation of how AXIA was created, on Brexit, so on and so forth. So sign up, you can get the chapter. I also very much encourage you, for people who want to know more, the kind of training that goes on, the kind of offerings that AXIA itself has. The easiest way, while you're signing up, you can hit the yes, do I want more educational training? Hit yes. And as I say to everyone, everything that goes into that material is drawn literally from upstairs, from the trading floors upstairs, flows into this kind of stuff. It's always like fresh and updated, and quite literally given to everyone that comes through our doors onto the floors. So now, lastly, just before I want to open up Q&A, Gonzalo, this was very much time dependent. I know we're a bit tight for time. You guys will see a lot of questions here. So there's a question on AI. There's a question, by the way, fantastic question, guys, in the last session, like really, really great. Like I was actually thinking about it for ages. Some of these questions, I might even like write about it on Asymmetrist, and obviously credit you guys, and so on, and just flesh out that idea, because there's a lot to talk about. I mean, there's literally one session there. So if you see some of your questions here, talk about complexity and everything else, I will either answer it with Peter in the following sessions, or I'll answer it some way, somehow at a certain point. So thank you for those. However, I do want to answer point blank these ones here, and then we'll dovetail into the questions so far in today's session. But some of these questions you can kind of group them. What combination of markets should I be looking at? I'd be more focused on watching just one at a time. How do you adapt strategy when volatility dries up or spikes unexpectedly? Do you follow a trend following mean reversion, volatility breakout setups, and why? Those subset can be answered by me answering another question. Expand on the distinction between upstream and downstream thinking, please. Great. So last session, I talked about the importance of always thinking upstream before you answer any downstream points. So, meaning, and it's best answered by an example. So, this question here, do you favor trend following, mean reversion, of volatility? The question is, favor what the market's doing. And you're like, oh my God, this guy, like, what do you mean? Of course. Basically, that is the answer. It's just for you to appreciate that that is the answer. You have to go on a long, massive journey to realize that is the answer. And then, you go on this long, massive journey of overcomplication. You got to add so many things and, to understand what you take away. But essentially, the ultimate upstream idea is that if I am fundamentally always doing what the market's doing, conceptually, then that should answer your downstream specific problem, anxiety or issue of do maybe this person's thinking, should I be a trend following trader? Maybe I should be a mean reversion trader, volatility trading trader. The idea is to be the trader that's doing what the market's doing at this exact moment in time. That's trading. Obviously, doing that is incredibly difficult, right? But that's how you can answer your own question by just thinking, okay, what's the more important upstream question here? How do you adapt your a strategy when volatility dries up or spikes unexpectedly? Again, that is only something you can answer based on off your own trading. But again, that is the advantage of a human. You can think forwards. What is volatility doing right now? What is it doing right now? Right now, is it drying up? Is it getting bigger? Okay, how can I adapt myself to that kind of question? So sort of like working backwards in the sense of just thinking at a higher level. Am I always updated and in tune with the market? Then that should answer my question of what do I do when volatility spikes or dries up? In terms of combination of the markets you should be looking at. Again, that's kind of a more nuanced question because it depends where you are on the learning curve as well. But again, thinking upstream, where are the prime opportunities for me to learn the most? Where are the prime opportunities for me to learn the most or perform the best? Both of those will be what's going on and what's the most, like, where's the action basically? Is it thematic? So you should probably be looking at various markets. Is it maybe just so much is going on so you can look at one market? Like, what can I do to best accelerate my learning? That's the upstream question to answer this downstream question. Or if I have to perform, where is the best, easiest, low-hanging fruit opportunity for me? So hopefully that kind of answers those questions. Now, Gonzalo, I'm sorry, I think I ticked over the hour, but maybe
No,
if
no problem,
people
no
want
problem.
to stay for just maybe 10 minutes just to answer some
Yeah,
questions. I'll scroll through now.
just 1 second, Bogdan. Guys, don't go
Yeah.
just yet because we have the giveaway of the Jigsaw
Indeed.
licenses.
Yes, yes.
So stay there because you have to claim your prize. You have to be here, right, to get the license.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, Bogdan, I have a question.
Yes.
Do for example, engineers tend to trade certain type of markets and like the warriors and other type of markets like volatility,
Yeah. So 100%. So like point blank, you'll always see favoritism for the engineer, the hero. I mean, to be honest, older traders in a lot of debt markets, specifically the German Bund. Now, I say that doesn't mean you should all be trading Bund tomorrow. Please don't like go crazy off the walls thinking that. The only reason I mention that that's a product of the lineage that has come before. Because when they were growing up, everyone was putting them on the Bund, and that's just by a product of just growing up with it, like familiarity. You also build up the most size, and you can execute. The other big advantage, because you are trading a fixed income product, often you can express countless trades in that space. Because it's so to explain it briefly, because it's a fixed income product, it's a derivative of rates and pricing in what the economy is going to do and basically what the whole world is going to do, a bit more in a more nuanced way than as opposed to equity. That's a whole other conversation. But like basically, it lets you do so many things at different times that maybe an equity wouldn't. So it's also a very good product just to have to be sort of flexible. And because you have that flexibility, it's in the Bund. Euro stocks is another one, so obviously being European centric, but the engineer does huge size and trades a lot in the S&P, crude oil. Um, Currency is not as much, but again, if needs be, like he'll also be opportunity driven. If there's a lot of action happening in one asset class, he will be trading it. But the big size will always be in the legacy markets, shall we say, of Bund Euro stocks.
All right, guys, just type your questions, Bogdan, if you can take those. Sorry.
Yes. Would you like me to you doing the raffle now? Sorry, Gonzalo, while I'm looking at the questions, or should we do questions first? Happy
No,
whichever way.
I'm happy to do that now. Just let me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I uploaded all the names here. So let's see if we. Let me
Yeah,
share
and then
my screen.
I'll do a few of the questions quickly. I'll speed run them.
Please. All right. Good luck, guys. It's here. Okay, Matthias is not here. Let's go again. We'll do it 3 times. If not, we'll have to pick one from Nick T. Nick T is here. Congratulations, Nick. So we have a winner. I will contact you via email. I'll have your registration email. All right.
Okay, perfect. I'll do quick fires on the questions, as many as I can. Um, uh, Peter Kaiser, are the concepts in mind over markets applied on the floor? 100%, yes. I mean, basically, mind over markets is a huge Bible. Uh, with James Dalton and Stiedelmeyer's not Mind Over Markets, but the other book. Yeah, 100%. Like the engineer and the hero have grown up on it. Everyone's familiar. Even the people who may not be profile centric are familiar. 100%. Must read for sure. Marcos, I can continue forever. Yes, I can. That's how a 500-page book happens, and then that's how asymmetrist happened. Demetrius, among these 3 data points, who was the fastest to get in there in terms of time development? How long did it take them? Oh, very good question, Demetrius. Okay, since I'll stick to quickfire, very good question. It comes up in different ways. I'll try and pin that for probably the next session. Um, the warrior and the razor were the fastest, meaning that the warrior is basically, since he was live, he was basically down maybe first month, and then after that second month he's been up on the count ever since. But he's the exception. I talked about this in the first session. Slow learning is best learning. On average, the slowest learners actually are the best learners, and therefore, the engineer took like at least 2-3 years before he even started. He went from down on the account to flat to then making it, and that's a product of environment and just so many other things. Same with the razor. He was profitable pretty quickly, but the razor and the warrior are unique cases. But that's also a product of them being very tactical traders. They just really maximize the opportunity in the markets at the time. Whereas the opportunity the engineer was trying to maximize only happened like 2 or 3 years later. But again, just because his development took so long because he's such a strategic trader. That's the quickest I can answer it. I think there's a question here. Do you think it's easier for engineer type trader to transition into a razor compared to the warrior? No, I think this is the point that, like, for the skill sets of navigating the price ladder, like the hero said, like, if you're so good at just trading the price ladder and nothing else, and understanding that over years and doing that consistently over years, then that's probably you as a trader. That's such a hard position to be in, like such a hard position. So at one point you'll have to interface some kind of strategic layer of being more nuanced with context, of when to size up, size down in trades, to understand the volatility landscape you're in, to understand the opportunity sets that are presented to you through some kind of framework, through some kind of strategic layer. Basically, the razor and the warrior being such tactical traders, they're like kind of like, if you kidnap them for 3 months, they don't see anything that's going on, and then you put them in front of a screen on any random day, they'll probably still be profitable in some way. Like they just have this uncanny ability to just figure it out. But like they're a rarity in that sense. Such good questions, guys. I really think don't work. So much to learn. Thank you, guys. Audiobook, TBA. I commonly comment on it, but TBA. I don't want to make too many promises on audiobook. Market emergence sense. I'll just do one more question, guys. The other ones I don't answer, I'll answer next session. Matt, you mentioned I'll do these ones. So from Matt, I've seen videos of the warrior executing thousands of contracts and the market immediately goes in his favor. How does he manage risk in these types of execution on news? So many different things. Often he will, again, this is a nuance of understanding what the opportunity is, because a one and done headline is very different from a slow burner. A slow burner means like the market's kind of digesting what it is. He'll put out like one market, one position, like you would, I don't know, like you're going fishing, right? And just seeing if the market bites. All of a sudden, the market's kind of like coalescing into kind of like a crescendo. And as it's approaching that kind of pacey kind of volatile, he'll be slowly increasing his exposure. Maybe he'll do more size in the same market, or maybe he will just hit another market, hit another market, hit another market. And then let's say he wants to do three markets, then he'll try and increase in those markets and work his way up. It's extremely rare he'll go complete psycho crazy, hit all the markets, whatever, because those moments in the markets are very rare. Like he doesn't do that every day for sure. Like yeah, hopefully that's explicit, very clear in the book, very clear with everything, and that should make sense. Andre, how do you trade a non-volatility scenario? I think what is very evident is that the non-volatility days that dominated 2013 to about 2019, basically before Trump came, it was anyone who only could make money in volatile environments were catastrophically cold from the environment. Again, it comes up how cold, we had 300-man trading floors, then it had 50-man trading floors in like 2 years, right? The Collector talks about, if anyone read the book and you know what chapter I'm talking about. Because so many people were basically so dependent on the market giving them opportunities and very low-hanging fruit opportunities. And when the market changed, they refused to think, they're like, oh, let's just wait for the market to become good again, right? And so what became apparent in those years, the very years the engineer was created and born as a trader, was I think that's when the strength of having a very framework, technical trading, framework explicit way of tackling the markets more than ever is required. And that's what I always say. High volatility conceals, low volatility reveals. Those people who have a very explicit, very deep understanding of the game and framework and everything will survive that low volatility period. So that is one explicit way you can trade it, or it is survived by those who can take very tactical opportunities that are still given to you very rarely by a low volatility environment. Unfortunately, it will mean having an account size and profitability where you can pay for like your entire life expenses. Hopefully, you won't have crazy lifestyle inflation in the meantime. And being able to just sit there and just trade those extremely rare opportunities, which, for example, the Warrior, I mean, he survived those, but it just meant the one time you have one tiny opportunity, you've got to maximize it to like the nth degree, and that's what really pushed him. That's what really made him really good. Like he's just such an animal for like pushing everything, because he saw how bad it can get, and that's what really engraved into him. Like you just never know when the last opportunity is there, and that's why he just maximizes. He, like we said in the book, he trades every single opportunity like the markets will shut forever tomorrow, right? Because everyone who survived that crazy culling period, it's kind of like deep in your bones that this thing will eventually happen. Low volatility will come. I promise you, low volatility will come. When it comes, we don't know, obviously. Otherwise, if you can answer that, you can make $1 trillion. But like, it will come, and it will really hurt people who haven't prepared for it. Okay, I'm sorry, Gonzalo. I think that is probably. I think
Yeah.
everyone is now. Yeah, not to go too overboard.
Yeah, we can do the same. We did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
we can
roll
collect.
over that some of the questions. Yeah.
Exactly,
Perfect.
exactly. All right, guys. That's the session for today. Thank you, Bogdan,
Thank
for
you, guys. Yeah, thank you,
uh,
Gonzalo. Thank you for the compliments in the Q&A in the chat about the book and everything. And yeah, thank you, guys.
yeah. We got 2 more sessions coming soon, so
Yes.
keep an eye on your inbox. You have the link and for the book to get the free chapter and Bogdan's X handle. I'll strongly suggest you follow him on X. And that's it. Thank you, guys, and we'll see you
Thank you,
next time.
guys. Take care. See you next time.
Bye bye.